Making motors is the world's biggest manufacturing business, and arguably it's the most important. The motor industry is itself a major customer of many other industries, from steel, glass, and rubber to machine tools and electric goods. Without it, the oil industry would be a shadow of its present share. The motor industry, moreover, is a huge employer. Between them, 2 million people working for the top of 2 dozen motor manufacturers support an estimated 3 million more making other automotive bits. A further 25 million people around the world depend on motor vehicles for their livelihoods, selling cars, driving trucks and buses, manning the petrol pumps in the repair trade, providing finance and insurance. For the developing world, building up a motor industry seems to offer the surest road to industrialization. All told, there are 265 million cars on the road of the world today. That's a further 60 million vans, trucks, and buses, and that makes one motor vehicle for every 12 people on Earth. Those vehicles are being added to and replaced at a rate of roughly 40 million a year. Even so, most of the growth has gone out of the American and European markets for new cars. They have reached maturity. That is, growth depends largely on custom of motorists replacing their existing vehicles or purchasing second cars rather than on first-time buyers. The Japanese market will also reach the same stage of maturity sometime in the 1980s. The real growth markets for new cars nowadays are in the less developed countries of Latin America, Southeast Asia, and parts of Asia. Most of those countries has absolutely no intention of allowing American, European, or Japanese motor manufacturers a free rein to exploit their expanding home markets. In fact, most others are intent on building up their own motor industries. Producing motor vehicles is not only a big employer, but it saves foreign exchange and it provides a solid base for building up a pyramid of modern manufacturing skills. And rightly or wrongly, they are thought to be metronome in manufacturing motors. The car industries in the developing countries are thus entering an era not unlike that facing the textile trades a generation ago. They remain healthy enough at home, but exporting finished goods becoming increasingly difficult. So competitions among the established motor manufacturers in the United States, Europe, and Japan is becoming fiercer. This is happening just as the old order is changing. The Detroit Big Three, GE, Ford, and Chrysler, are become more forced by government regulations to invest very big sums indeed to make their cars safer, cleaner, quieter, and more fragile. The 70 billion the American auto industry is self-spending on new models, tools, and factories over the next 6 years or so is twice as much in real terms as the federal government spends on the whole MOON program. And though nowhere near as dramatic as the program, the present spending sphere on research and innovation as well as productivity boost equipment is quietly having an even bigger impact on American industry than the moon shoot did. Stamping up the kind of cash is also forcing the American automobile to rethinking their business policies. Chrysler, for instance, has had to withdraw from the World League not so General Motors, the world's largest automobile manufacturer. With Ford, it is embarked on the final globalization of its business. Both are preparing to go to the offensive in the 1980s with their new economical world cars. At home, they are pushing the important cars back into the sea. Boldly, they are shaping up to become the most dominant car producers. This is putting Europe's own fragmented motor industry under considerable strain, driven out of the traditional export markets under increasing attack in the third world from the Japanese manufacturers looking for other markets in which to replace lost American sales. Confronted by the only truly pan-European motor manufacturers in their own midst, Europe indigenous car firms will have to learn lessons in the 1980s of how to hang together, or they will most assured hang alone. This survey examined the forces shaped the car industry around the world as they prepare for the full-scale 1980s. There will be a few technical surprises in the decades. This is because it takes 4 or 5 years to develop a new car model, which they stay on the market essentially unchanged for another 6 to 8 years. So the car being developed today for the early 1980s will start be production by the early 1990s. They will, of course, be joined by newer models that are ever more economical to run. But nothing in the laboratory came close to reveal the petrol engine, and to a less extent the diesel, and the power source. They remain the most efficient means for ekering out of world expensive oil supply until the 1990s. However, before then, more proud motor names could disappear for good unless fundamental changes are made within European car firms and new links forged. This survey is solely concerned with passenger cars, not motor vehicles. The commercial vehicle business is also experiencing painful changes, but not so dramatically and for quite different reasons. So, to begin at the beginning, in Detroit, any visitor from Europe waiting for a car at Detroit Airport cannot but be shocked by the appalling condition of many of the cars collecting his fellow passengers. Almost all of them display scales of freeway driving and city parking, along with the remorseless tour of corruption, carelessness, and vandalism. The cabs, in particular, look like deep trucks kept on the road by their driver's skill. Many indeed are. All this in the capital of the United States, indeed, the world automobile industry, where a new car costs half the equivalent price in Europe. True, the climatic extremes experienced in much of the United States break up the roads and the rock hog on car spring. Also, the millions of tons of salt spraying literature on the road each winter make cars fall apart quickly. Another reason is because driving in the United States has become simply a painful necessity. It's not helped by the crowded and cramped roads, nor by the blackened 55 per hour speed limit, which mixed dangerously forced 18-wheel stragglers with touring models. This speed limit may have saved countless lives, but it has also made driving that much less tolerable. In a land with only 7% of personal traffic is done by public transportation, the car is a vital cog in the country's social and commercial machinery, and is a universal cog. There's one car for every two people. In California, there are actually more cars than drivers. With cars so matter a fact of life, no wonder there is little proud of ownership. Above all, many American businesses appear to be in such a sorrow state because there is no federal roadworthiness requirement. Few cabs, for instance, can pass Britain motor test. There are, of course, plenty of government regulations in the United States aimed at the motor car. Probably too many, but most concerned there was a made and now it performed at the role of factory assembly line. No one in Washington has demanded, with anything like equal further, that motorists should also be regulated, that the law should crack down especially hard on drunken driver, that a nationwide drinking license and insurance standards should be introduced, or that vehicles should be examined and road tested annually before their license is renewed. Currently, it is much easier for Washington to regulate a handful of motor manufacturers that suffer the wrath of over 100 million voting motorists. The American motor industry certainly needed joint out of its complicity. Mr. Rodolphe Nassar did exactly that. His book Unsafe at Any Speed, published in 1960, unleashing the present era of mobile regulation. Until then, about 5 million cars was overhauled each year by manufacturers for safety reasons. With the tougher new laws, the number of recalls has now risen about 13 million a year. Road deaths has in fact fallen 40% since 1966, when the first of the new safety law came into effect. They are down from 5.7 to 3.3 deaths per 100 million miles of motor. Without the recent safety regulation, estimate 28,000 Americans would have died on the road in 1977. Instead, fatality has fallen to 47,000. This is still bad, but it's better than in any other country.